to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, independent financial advisor, owner of Elevation Financial. Glad you're here. Welcome. A couple episodes into 2022, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics today, which is budgeting. Don't worry, stay with me though, as the title implies, not your everyday budgeting discussion. Specifically, budget alternatives for people who don't want to budget. So if you're one of those people that doesn't want to budget, this is for you. I'm talking to you today. Welcome. This is the Safe Tree. So as you probably know, if you've known me for more than 5 minutes, I'm a big fan of budgeting. I really think budgeting is key to making a lot of other things work in your financial plan. It's key to unlocking, being intentional with your cash flow. Just overall, it's a lot of good comes from budgeting. I'm a big user of YNAB. I like You Need a Budget, or YNAB for short, YNAB. Other people like tools like Mint and Every Dollar and things like that. I'm a huge YNAB fan. YNAB is kind of a cult following. It's a really tight community of people that love YNAB and love to budget. I'm one of them, so I'm very focused on budgeting, but I know a lot of people are not, and I want to make sure that we have a discussion around other ways to manage your cash flow, even if you're not a crazy intense budgeter like I am, or like the YNABer community. So let's talk about what to do if this is you, if this describes you. So, and by the way, this may describe you if you think you're a fan of budgeting, but it turns out you're not. A lot of people I've worked with are like, yeah, I love the idea of budgeting and I want to try it, and it just doesn't stick. And so that's okay. Maybe you're one of those people that have tried it and maybe has good intentions to be a strict budgeter, but it just for whatever reason just didn't work out. So let's talk about a few ways you can manage your cash flow without strict budgeting. And we're going to start with the strictest form as the baseline and then kind of go from there. So this is called a zero-based budget. So the first budgeting style is a zero-based budget, and that is what I do. And that's what a lot of the YNAB community does. YNAB, again, stands for You Need a Budget, which is one of the really popular budgeting tools out there, and one that I use. And zero-based budgeting is a method of being extremely detailed and giving every dollar a job to do. Every dollar, every expenditure, every dollar you have has a task and a job and a purpose. And so what this looks like is when you when money comes in, you allocate that money to certain budget categories, and then as money goes out, you track those, or your budgeting system automatically pulls those transactions in. Over time they'll automatically get categorized, or you manually categorize some, and you really are very meticulous about where your money goes. And it's called a zero-based budget because ideally you don't really have dollars sitting around without a purpose. So if you have an extra $100 in your budget, ideally you would assign that somewhere. So maybe you would assign it to, a savings category, or to go into your Roth IRA, or to go into, some other account, or to pay off a certain debt. So every dollar that's sitting around ends up having something to do. And ultimately your budget always kind of balances to zero, or at least, close to zero. So that way you're not letting money kind of sit there without a purpose. So when you're zero-based budgeting, basically everything has a category. So whenever money comes in or out, it's got a category. So when something is going out, you're putting it into a category like, rent or mortgage or groceries or household items or dining out or insurance or whatever it is, or investments or retirement saving. All that stuff gets assigned a purpose. So it sounds really cool and really clean, and I think it is, but it can be challenging for many because it does take some focus and some detail work and attention to detail to make it really happen, and you have to keep up with it. So I open YNAB on my phone every couple days, and I'll go in there and I'll approve transactions, I'll categorize things if they're not automatically categorized, I'll kind of keep up with it. And every month I'm looking at a big picture view of my budget and allocating things and making projections and plans and adjustments. And again, something I like to do, but that's not for everybody. So let's talk about some of the alternatives if you are not really feeling the vibe of the zero-based budget. Maybe you're more of a free spirit and you need something that is less detail oriented and less kind of focused and intense. So one alternative is the pay yourself first budget, or reverse budget. One name for this is reverse budgeting. And out of all the alternatives, I think this is my favorite. And it's my favorite because it is kind of the antithesis of the zero-based budget when it comes to how much effort you need to put into it. It's pretty low maintenance, but it does involve setting up some systems. So the idea behind the pay yourself first budget or the reverse budget is that it's kind of in reverse to what you might think of with a budget. Before you track or assign any kind of expenditures or outflows, your goal is to first assign or account for or prioritize money that is for you, for your savings, for your investing, for the stuff that is big picture, goal oriented stuff. These would be things like saving in your Roth IRA, saving in your emergency fund, saving up for a big purchase, chunking a bunch of money into a savings account, putting money into your kids' 529 accounts, putting money into your HSA, stuff that is kind of boring that we don't really instinctively want to do, but it's really important. And it otherwise might get left as a lower priority or put on the back burner. So if you think of it, let's say you're not doing any kind of budgeting, when money comes in, you might spend it. You're likely just to kind of let it go somewhere. And when the end of the month rolls around, you may not have anything left for your Roth IRA or for your savings accounts. So what this does, it says at the beginning of the month, you're going to be setting up specific auto recurring contributions going into these high priority lifestyle kind of goal oriented accounts. So one example might be at the first of the month, you've got a Roth IRA contribution coming out every month automatically. So it's set up as an auto recurring contribution. So every month, your system or your investment broker or whoever is doing it, automatically moves money from your checking account into your Roth IRA on the first of the month. At the same time, maybe a chunk of money goes into your kids' 529 accounts. Maybe a chunk goes into emergency fund to keep building it up. Maybe a chunk goes into your HSA. Maybe a chunk goes into your account for big purchases or whatever that might be. So all the stuff that is savings oriented that you never get around to comes out first, and it's automated. The key is to make it automated. The key is to make sure you don't have to manually do anything. So go in there, whatever system you need to use, whatever your bank system or your investment, portal is, go in there and click whatever buttons you need to click to say automatically every month, transfer this money without me doing anything. So when those things are on autopilot, every month a chunk comes out. And of course, you got to plan for that chunk. You've got to, time it after the first paycheck of the month, for example, or time it after the first inflow, whatever that first inflow is, time it so it happens after that or immediately, the day after. So you're not overdrawing or anything. But when that happens, all of the important stuff is taken care of first. And then whatever's left over, you just do what you want with. You just spend it. There's no need to budget, no need to track, because you have then a chunk of money left over and you can just spend it on whatever you want to spend it on. Now, I would include things like, mortgage coming out in the first of the month. So, along with savings goals, make sure the mortgage or rent comes out, make sure you're not homeless, make sure the stuff that's important comes out. But, don't budget for dining out, don't budget for groceries, don't budget for entertainment, whatever. Just make that, your extra money. Now, obviously, you have to be careful. You got to watch your bank balance, but you're not tracking everything. You're not opening up a budgeting app. You're just basically putting the important stuff on autopilot at the beginning of the month, and whatever's left over is yours to do what you want with. This can work really well for a lot of people. It's really well suited for people who just, they don't want to mess with a budgeting app. They just don't have the interest in, focusing on every little expenditure and assigning dollars around and, the detailed work that goes with that. If that's just something that, describes you, then the reverse budgeting approach might make a lot of sense. And it kind of checks the box of getting the important stuff taken care of. So consider that one. So another method of budgeting, if you're not doing pay yourself first necessarily, is the envelope system budgeting. Now, before you tune me out by thinking, oh, envelopes of cash. Yes, one method is envelopes of cash, but you can also replicate this with different bank accounts. So I'll start with the envelopes of cash because that's kind of the visualization we start with, which is, at the beginning of every month or every paycheck or whatever, you just pull out a bunch of cash and you put the cash in different envelopes that are for different things like groceries or dining out or whatever. And that way you can kind of see how much is left in each envelope and you kind of pace yourself. Now, some people do like this. If you like cash, yeah, this will work, but a lot of people don't, and it would drive me crazy because I hate dealing with cash. So, an alternative to this could be to set up multiple checking accounts with multiple debit cards attached that can kind of take the place of the envelope. So maybe big broad categories like food. You've got a food account, you've got an entertainment account, you've got something else, and you kind of divide those up by different bank accounts. Or maybe you just have one debit card and then multiple savings accounts, and then you just kind of move the money in from the accounts after you divvy them up. So you can replicate envelopes through bank accounts as well. Now, some would argue by using YNAB, you're actually creating envelopes, but it's a different mindset. It's kind of a different way of approaching it. So for some people, just having like a handful of envelopes or a handful of bank accounts acting like envelopes just makes it easier. And so that can be a way to approach budgeting without really messing with detailed budgeting. So another one is called the 50-30-20 budget. There are different ratios you can play with. There's also like an 80-20 version of this, but one really common one is the 50-30-20 budget. And what you do is you just kind of make three broad buckets in your mind or on a spreadsheet or just kind of on paper even. And you say, well, whatever money comes in each month, 50% of it is for necessary expenses. These are for, things like, rent and food and utilities and all the stuff that you have to pay for. So you take 50% of it, allocate it to necessary expenses. The rest is divided 30 and 20. 30% is for discretionary. These are things like eating out, entertainment, stuff you don't need, but stuff you want. And that would be the 30% comes from. And then finally, the 20% that's left is for savings and debt payments. So that 20% chunk you allocate toward, your Roth IRA, paying off some credit card debt, paying off student loans, investing in, like I said, long-term investment accounts or retirement accounts or savings in general. That's what that would be for. So that keeps you from messing with little transactions all day long. But it does give you some broad segmentation for how your money is allocated. So that can be tracked with a spreadsheet or on paper, or even just kind of in your head. It's really easy just to kind of earmark these things and keep them broad and pretty generalized. There's also a method, and the last one I'm going to talk about today is called the no budget or the anti-budget. And this is not really a budget necessarily, but it kind of counts because it's a way that can work for some people. And it is basically just simply not spending money that you don't have. And all it is really keeping an eye on your checking account balance and watching out for what's in your checking account. Excuse me. Got a little tickle in my throat from the cold weather. Give me a moment to take a drink. All right. So with that, you would take a look at your bank balance and basically just keep an eye on what's there and only spend money you actually have. And that's really as simple as it sounds. So when you spend money, you wait a couple days for it to show up in your bank balance and watch the balance, and you really kind of slow your spending down, and you make sure that you're either tracking in some sort of system or you're waiting for transactions to hit your account, and you're always keeping an eye on making a big buffer in there in your bank account and only spending what's there. Excuse me. I may cough a little bit more because, like I said, the dry, cold weather makes my throat kind of scratchy. All right, I got some more water there. So this method, again, is not really a great way to budget necessarily because it's not really a budget, but it's at least some sort of system. And it's what some people do kind of by default. So I think there's some value in just kind of looking at your bank balance and being intentional about saying, okay, here's the method I'm using, and that's what I'm going to do. So those are some methods of budgeting if you don't want to use YNAB or Mint or tools like that and go with a zero-based approach. Excuse me. So with that, I would say don't feel bad if you're not necessarily an intense budgeter. Use some of these methods of budgeting if they work for you. And especially take a look at the reverse budget or the pay yourself first budget. And that can work really well for a lot of people, especially due to the automation that kind of comes with it. So take a look at those and see if they'll work for you. One more drink, stand by. That's one of the downsides of doing this live and no editing. All the awkward pauses and drinks kind of come out. So anyway, with that, I'm going to wrap up there before I cough in your ear anymore. But I'll say this. If you do want to talk budgeting, I'm always a big fan, always enjoying talking budgeting. So feel free to reach out. My website is elevationfinancial.com. And if you'd like to book a money session, there's a big friendly button on the homepage where you can book a money session. It's complimentary, and always happy to chat about budgeting or anything else. So with that, again, elevationfinancial.com is where to find me. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.